When more fortunate troops from colder climates, men owning shoes and blankets, spotted such a mound, they dug inside, stripped the dead bodies of whatever clothes remained, and wrapped their own bodies and faces against the storm. At the rear, of course, the women and children suffered terribly. Like the Yucatecs, they huddled in groups, but many died. It was shocking for the rear guard soldiers who trailed far behind to come upon the frozen bodies of children abandoned in the snow. Horses, mules, and oxen, also unaccustomed to such a storm, dashed across the blinding landscape, running into trees and collapsing in huge drifts which quickly hid them. When the storm was at its worst, real terror struck. A horde of Apaches who had long known how to protect themselves during a blue norther began to ravage the stragglers, stealing what horses remained and what stores of food were still available. However, an even worse Indian peril awaited, for a new tribe had recently exploded into the region, the fiercest and most capable ever to terrify the West. They were the Comanches, the horse Indians who had galloped down from the mountain regions around Utah to establish themselves firmly in western Tejas. Remorseless in battle, even more cruel than the Apaches when prisoners were taken, they were a swift-riding scourge who would never be controlled, only eliminated, and now one of their raiding parties on its way to plunder Saltillo, a favorite target, saw the Mexican army trapped in the snow and powerless. In all their western battles, the dreaded Comanches never attacked a major force head-on. With curdling battle cries, they would parry and thrust at any isolated position. With such tactics, they now decimated the entire western perimeter of the hapless army, sweeping in to kill those who could and capturing whatever equipment was left. When the norther subsided and the remaining men and mules were counted, Santa Anna's army found it had suffered a tremendous loss. The general, safe inside stout walls, must have been aware of the disaster, but neither then nor ever did he refer to it. He believed that an army must accept casualties when required to march over great distances, a reality of war, unpleasant but acceptable. And from the practical point of view, the Army's experience in the Monclova blizzard may have been salutary, for it got rid of the largely useless Yucatecs. It toughened up the line, and it enabled one young lieutenant who dreamed of impending glory to tell his mates, "If we can survive that blizzard and those Comanches, we have little to fear from the rebels in Tejas. It'll be Zacatecas all over again." Joining his now depleted army, General Santa Anna continued his advance north in Tejas when he directed his army, still huge, towards San Antonio. There in an old mission building, the Americans who had filtered into Tejas waited to defend what they were already thinking of as our new nation. The Alamo, a name probably derived from a nearby grove of cottonwood trees, had originally been founded in 1718 as the San Antonio de Valero mission. In the years since the chapel's cornerstone was laid in 1744, the building had acquired sturdy, protective, fortress-like walls and in fact was used as a barracks building for Mexican soldiers after the mission was abandoned in 1797. Now these walls protected Davy Crockett, Jim Bowie, and William B. Travis, who were extremely brave, but who commanded only 184 other defenders, including some dozen Native Americans who had chosen to fight alongside the Americans. Some dozen Native Mexicans who had chosen to fight alongside the Americans. Since Santa Anna had more than 5,000 soldiers in his attacking force, a Mexican victory seemed inevitable. For 13 relentless days, the Mexican troops besieged the defenders of the Alamo. Santa Anna conducted the battle under a blood-red flag to the marching tune Degüello, each symbol traditionally meaning, "Surrender now or you will be executed when we win." In the final charge through the walls of the Alamo, there would be no quarter. The men inside knew that this time the often windy cry, "Victory or death," meant what it said. Early in the morning of the 13th day, Santa Anna's foot soldiers, lashed forward by officers who did not care how many of their men were lost in the attack, stormed the walls, overcame the defenders, and slaughtered every man inside, American or Mexican. Jim Bowie was slain in his sickbed. Captain Travis was shot on the walls. What exactly happened to Davy Crockett would never be known. Dead inside the walls or murdered later outside as a prisoner of war, but dead. The Texicans lost 186, the Mexicans about 600. One Texican, a grizzled French veteran of the Napoleonic Wars, had fled the fort before the last fight began. Santa Anna had won a crushing victory and had been remorseless in exterminating Texicans. Any evaluation of Mexico's stunning victory at the Alamo must consider two hideous acts of Santa Anna, acts so contemptuous of the customary decencies which always existed between honorable adversaries that they enraged the Americans, kindling fires of revenge that would be extinguished only in the equally horrible acts that followed the great Texas victory at San Jacinto. When a group of prisoners was brought to Santa Anna, he said scornfully, "I do not want to see these men living," and despite the rules which ensured safety to soldiers who surrendered honorably, he growled, "Shoot them," and they were executed. Enraging the Texicans even more was his treatment of the bodies of the men who had died bravely trying to defend the Alamo. Instead of providing the bodies with a decent burial or turning them over to their friends for proper burial, he had the corpses thrown into a great pile as if they were useless timbers, then cremated in slow fires for 2.5 days. When the heat subsided, scavenging citizens probed the ashes for metal items of value, after which the bones were left to dogs and vultures. When news of the desecration circulated, a fearful oath was sworn by Texicans. Remember the Alamo. Flushed by his triumph, Santa Anna behaved as if he were all-powerful. When a detachment of his army won a second victory at Goliad, some miles southeast of San Antonio, taking more than 400 prisoners during several skirmishes, he ordered the general in charge to execute every man. The general reminded Santa Anna by messenger that he had persuaded the Texicans, many of them volunteers who had been in Tejas less than 6 months, to surrender by guaranteeing their personal safety and granting them full honors of war. I pledged my word to treat them honorably and am bound to do so. I must, with due respect, refuse to execute them while they are unarmed and under my protection. When Santa Anna received this message, he broke into a rage. Has he not heard of that law we passed last year after the American invasion of Tampico? It orders the immediate execution of any foreigner invading our sacred land with evil intent. Using the same messenger who had brought him news of refusal, he dispatched a harsh rebuke to the general holding the prisoners at Goliad. I therefore order that you should give immediate effect to the said ordinance in respect to all those foreigners who have the audacity to come and insult the Republic. I trust you will inform me that public vengeance has been satisfied by the punishment of such detestable delinquents. In simple words, execute the rebels. On a bright spring morning, the Mexicans marched nearly 400 unarmed prisoners in 3 different groups along country roads, suddenly turning on them and murdering 342. Those who escaped by fleeing across fields, ducking into woods, and throwing themselves into streams in which they swam to safety, spread news of the massacre. Across Texas, men whispered with a terrifying lust for vengeance, "Remember the Alamo. Remember Goliad." By design, Sam Houston had missed both encounters. Like Quintus Fabius Maximus, he preferred to gather men and weapons, waiting for a time and a location more favorable to his cause. The Eagle and the Raven were almost ready for their great confrontation. In the wintry days of 1836, they circled ever closer, preparing for the battle which would determine the outcome of the war and the future of Texas.